What's up, guys? Brandon Hicks here with another live stream in Blender, and I hope you guys are having a good Friday night. I'm going to be here for the next couple of hours going through some modeling on my 3D illustration that I'm doing. So settle in, grab some coffee or whatever you want to drink, and have some dinner or something, and maybe even model along as we get going. And it's going to be good. So I've got a couple of other live streams that I did earlier this week, and if you have been watching along, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to do that. This is kind of a new thing for me, and only really my third stream on this channel. So if you want to chat, I've got a window open. So if you pop in at some point and you want to ask a question or just leave me a comment, subscribe, something like that, definitely do it. And I'd love to have the interaction, the feedback, and get a chance to talk to you a little more. So, okay. There's been a lot going on with this project. I had some hiccups with some of the other streams as far as the way that I was trying to work out some issues with another model. And I've been trying to work through that a little bit. Not the most complex model in the world. It's a pretty simple model, but the method that we're trying to use to go ahead and add some of the details into the model, it's something I'm not normally used to with the workflow. So it's a little tricky. It's been kind of kicking my butt. But it always kind of feels that way. Easy stuff is what trips you up. It's not the hard stuff. Because the hard stuff you know, you're ready for. You study, you practice, you're on top of it. But easier stuff sneaks up on you. So what I'm doing right now is I'm modeling a teacup that I started last night, and this is let me just pull up the concept art so you guys can see if you haven't tuned in already. Pull up the file for this project. All right. Too many files. All right. So, yeah, there we go. This is the concept painting we've been working from. So I painted this up quite a long time ago. And this is just one of those projects that never really got finished. I just kept thinking about it over the years, coming back to it every now and then, and never really got it off the ground. You know, life just kind of got in the way. So I'm circling back around at this point and trying to finish this thing up. The goal for the end of this month, which is only about a week away, is to get all of the modeling finished. So we're pretty far in terms of the layout, and so the hiccup is that I was talking about earlier is kind of in this little sugar bowl dish that I've been messing with. And it's ironic because I talked earlier in my stream yesterday about how, you know, don't worry about the stuff that you're not going to see. And a lot of the stuff that I've been concerned about in the texture is stuff that you're probably not even going to see in the final shot. So let that be a lesson to you, not to you know, get yourself worked up about stuff that doesn't really matter. Efficiency is key. So let's focus on tonight. We're gonna work on the little tea cup here. Probably try to fill this up with an object to represent the tea. Might block in the spoon and then the saucer. And then I wanted to do like a little placemat doily kind of thing that goes under this. Not sure if we'll get to that on the stream, but if we get time, I might even circle back around, excuse me, and tackle this little sugar bowl again, because I was working on it this afternoon. So anyways, if you haven't tuned in, this is what we've been working on. So pull this back over here, and I'm trying to decide what else I want to do this teacup. I actually don't think I want to solidify this right now, because the inner wall is going to be a little different than the outer wall. So from the side, hold on, turn my fan on. It's getting a little toasty in here. I want to model an inside wall that is a little bit more lined up with how this is going to need to sit towards the bottom of the cup, and that way you're not seeing all the way through down to the underside. So let's pull up our properties, global axis, zero out the X and the Y. And there we go. Okay, so I am going to pull these a little closer together so that we have a little bit of an edge. There we go. It's a little bit more like what it would be in a teacup. I've also been heavily relying on reference from Pinterest to kind of get things in the place where they look accurate. So I pull this over, you can kind of see some of the influences we've been looking at. The particular teacup that I'm using right now is this reference for the handle and all of this. So probably go a different direction with the printing. We'll get to the shading and the texturing, but it's an interesting shape for the base and everything. So I thought I would play with that. The goal for the image is to do something that is sort of in the Victorian period, you know. I say that 1920s is what I'm shooting for. So Art Deco, you know, not sure how to accurately describe that era, but that's kind of what we're doing. So I've created this giant board and then all of these little subsections for the pieces that we're working on. So right now we've got our sugar area with the little piece that we've been working on. And the reason I've been having issues is like we're trying to figure out how to get a nice glass etching or raised and sunken areas into this glass. And I've been trying different methods that haven't really given me what I want so far. So the question is whether or not we need to get into doing actual displacement in a modifier stack, modeling this with a subsurf modifier, which would get really, really tricky with all these intricate details, or just trying to do this in a shader, which I think is actually going to be the best answer, because for what we're going to do for this project, we can create a simple tiled texture and then apply that. So anyways, I'm getting off topic. I know we're not working on that right now. We're working on the tea set, so lots going on. All right, I think I'm actually gonna wanna do something like a lemon in there too. If we're looking top down on our reference from the concept art, this is kind of the vibe I'm going for. And it's gonna be a little bit more moody, dark shot, but at some point we'll have to come in here and play with modeling a lemon. And I haven't done a lot of food in the past, so that'll be interesting. All right. Typically, I like to split things up a lot in terms of different files and then link them all back into the main project. But in this case, I've got enough files starting to pile up. So I'm not gonna do that in this case. So I'm gonna work on the saucer at this point. This will be another easy win. So I'm gonna duplicate these first two vertices, still in the same object for the teacup. I'm gonna hit P, separate those off. And while we're in this file, I'll turn that on. So if you need to see the shortcut keys, they're gonna be down here in the lower left-hand corner. And so let's play with modeling the plate. So question is like, how fancy do we want to get with it? And also how big, because we can go pretty wide and do something that is wider than the outside of this teacup, or we can go further in and do something a little bit more like this and something subtle. So what I have been leaning towards is doing something pretty decorative with print on it. And as you can see, we have a lot of styles here to kind of base things off of. This is a kind of interesting one. What's really cool is like the flowery type of petal silhouettes on some of those. So I don't know. I don't know if we want to go simple here, or if we want to go a little bit more complex. Even this is kind of straightforward and it looks nice. Nice and classy. Okay, so from the base out, we're gonna have these concentric rings that have little tiny lips on them going, curving up towards the edge. So this teacup has a bit wider of a base, but I'm going to create some lips like this. And of course, we're gonna have to, you know, sort of block these in and then come back and see how many points we need to add to make this sort of work. But I'm using a screw modifier and then a subsurf after that. And it's a really fast way, if you're gonna work with something that's symmetrical, to block in that shape. So for anything like these cups or plates or whatever, it's been good. So we don't want to get too extreme with that angle too fast, because then it's going to be hard to not make this plate really, really tall. Let's pull this in a little more. So remember, this first lip probably going to be there to make sure this this teacup has something to sit inside of, and so you don't want to pull it too far away from the teacup itself over there. Second lip, I'm not really sure. Might be there to grab the tea that overflows on the edge, or just whatever. I don't know. But now we can go ahead and start pulling this up. And typically on the bottom, what you're gonna have is that drop, and then right where it contacts the table, you're gonna have a little lip, and then that, I don't know if it gives it friction or what it does, but you know how plates work. That's typically how it happens. So okay, so we'll zero that out, and there we go. Okay, so this first ring may be a little close for us to even be able to tell that it's there. Actually, because of the subsurf, it's probably gonna need to come in further so we can, okay, so no, that's not it. This is this ring. So that would mean that this needs to come out. There we go. Play with it until you see it. Okay. So something like that. All right. So I'm not really that concerned at this point that it's not sitting on the ground plane, but we'll have to remember that when we start placing it into the other shots, because that's going to be something that's going to kind of throw things off. Consistency with the way that you set a library up is important, because you know, without making sure that everything's kind of lined up the same from file to file, you're going to start running into issues, because it's hard to track what is going on with the files if something goes wrong. And so it can be easy to lose track of how you set something up, and then yeah, you'd have a problem. Okay, so I want to give it a little bit of a hook. I don't know, that's probably good enough. Simple object. Texture is going to make that look interesting. So if we wanted to create a little bit of an interesting, silhouette on this, what we could probably do is play with modifying one section before we duplicate that around. So let's say we lose the subsurf, and then for this, we go ahead and apply it. And when I go into face mode, select this one section, invert that, and then I'm going to delete all of the faces. So we have just one section of this plate right here. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and add let's say an array modifier. And then I'm gonna need an object like an empty in the middle of our world to control the behavior of this. I'm gonna apply the scale so that nothing weird happens. Jump back over to this piece. Now we don't want them duplicating out to the side. We want them to wrap around the center. So what I'm gonna do is select object offset and then pick that empty. I'm gonna turn the relative offset down to 0. And then I'm gonna rotate around the Z-axis so we can duplicate that first section. And since we have 8 sections total that we need to mimic from the way that we did the screw modifier before, we need to go around 45 degrees exactly to match that up in the middle. So we're gonna click merge first and last, and that way they'll connect in the middle. And then if we were to add a subdivision surface modifier after the array with the merge, and we add enough sections back, we're gonna get our plate back again. What's cool about this is if you go in here and then you add, let's say, a loop cut right there, that by itself is gonna give you some interesting sort of octagonal shapes going on there. But what's cooler is, let's say you were gonna, you can move out this section right here or move in the other sections. So let's say we want to scale from the 3D cursor that's located in the middle of our 3D world. And I just want to scale on the X and Y axis, so not up and down, not on the Z axis. So I hit S, Shift Z, and now we can kind of scale that out a little more, like that. Or we could scale in even and kind of get the reverse effect. So that would be a way to get a little flowery type of petal look there. So to decide at this point whether or not we like that. I don't like what it's doing here in the middle. I want to keep those round. So I'm gonna undo this and then maybe deselect. Deselect all of these points right here. So let's try this again. Scale here. Pull that in a little bit. There we go. So we're maintaining those circles, but we are now getting a little bit of an interesting edge there on the plate. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I like that, but anyways, we can play with that later. So at this point, we could model the spoon. Let me go grab some reference for that real fast. And I don't know. Yeah, I did. I grabbed some reference. Okay. So here we are. And I'm not going to do the whole spoon because I want to go in and add these little sections right here that have all this detail. And that's going to probably be sculpted from a high res. And then we're going to bake a normal map from that as we retopo. So not sure I want to get into that tonight, but maybe. We'll see. If you pop in and you want to see me sculpt something, then, let me know, and I'll try to accommodate whoever's watching. Okay, so we need an object in here for the T. So easy way to do this would be to grab what we already have. So I'm gonna use every little piece we have here to get started. Shift E, duplicate, P, separate that selection, and then grab this. And it wouldn't hurt to start labeling stuff because things are gonna start getting kind of complicated. Okay. So this is going to end up being a solid mesh that we're going to treat as sort of a volumetric kind of thing in cycles. Maybe. I don't want to promise we're going to do volumetrics, but that's the idea. It's liquid, so we want it to be a solid object all the way around. So I'm going to make sure we have that connecting exactly back up in the middle of our object here. And then I want a bevel, pretty tight bevel here for this liquid. So 3 vertices there will give us a really sharp corner. And you want these, I mean, real close together. This should be sitting up next to the, should be laying on the wall of the teacup, obviously. So any little gaps there, you're gonna get shadowing. And yeah, you definitely don't want that. Okay, it's probably good enough for now. And then we can decide kind of how full we want this to be. Pick an area, and then you can edge slide to that depth. And remember, we're gonna have the spoon coming out the side. We're gonna have a lemon maybe sitting on top, floating. So we want to leave room for all of that stuff. So maybe somewhere around there. And I'm gonna try to pull these down. Okay, so you see this sort of faint gray line compared to the black line. The black line here is the inner wall for the teacup. So we want to make sure that even if we need to add points, that we're getting what we need. If you add too many points, you're gonna run the risk of things being very difficult to line up. So here we have 1 point that controls pretty much this entire curvature, and in this case, that's doing a good job helping us maintain that. So in this case, we can copy the Z coordinate and paste that in there, so that's straight across again. And that's a little bit better in terms of the level of T. So one of the other things I kind of like to do as we go is if you assign materials and pick some viewport colors, it makes it a little easier to visually see what you're trying to compose when you get back into your layout scene. Because if it's just a pile of gray objects, it can get really confusing to look at. You know, you want to try to think through the process of how you're going to name things. And T makes sense. That's an actual substance. Teacup, maybe not. That's an object. So what would we call this? Maybe China is a better. It's like a slang used for the like bone china, for that's more oriental. For cups and stuff. That's fine dining and everything. But in this case, I think that'll work. So China porcelain, maybe something that is gonna work. And all of these objects are actually gonna be that same material. So this is good too, because if you do the organization as you go, you're not gonna have this mountain of things to go back and fix later on. So maybe give it a slight blue tint there. Feels like porcelain or something. Okay, so now we'll save. Now, as we get into pulling these into the other scene, you're doing this by grouping objects. And so in this case, we're gonna wanna make sure that as we pick how we group these, if we need anything to be separated off and moved around, animated or whatever, that you're bearing that in mind as you group, because it can change your strategy for how you import, export, and all that. So in this case, I'm not really going to be moving any of this stuff around. It's going to be locked in where it is. And so if I pull this in as one group, it's going to come in as one solid object, and that's fine. So we'll grab the T and all of these objects and then group them into a T set. Okay. All right. So we're gonna get into the spoon now. So I'm gonna save this, and let's go ahead and open up our original scene file so we can place this in. And you can kind of see what we've been working on. So got fountain pen, little journal, everything from the concept art basically. So at this point, we can hit file link, jump over to the sugar file, groups. Oh, sorry, not sugar file. My brain's been on that lately. T set. There we go. Group T set. Okay, enter. And now it's going to come in at the same size it is in the other file. So what I've been doing is pulling these in and then sort of altering the scale as we go. If we are actually in top view, which we are, shouldn't be an issue moving this around just with G. But you want to be careful if you're shifting into camera view. We're top down and it feels like you could just move it around this way, but it's actually going to get off axis and go off the ground plane, so you don't want to do that. Top view here. Okay. And then let's pull up the concept painting again. Reference kind of where that's at in correlation to the rest of the composition. So I thought this through pretty heavily when I was painting this up. And I kind of tried to put the pieces in place in the shot where your eye was kind of led around the scene this way. So we're going to try to maintain that as we pose things in 3D. So we can look in this upper right hand corner here and kind of see if this is still following that sort of pattern. So got this down here a little bit more, so maybe turn this around. And the goal for me is always to pose all these individual objects so that two big things are happening for us in the illustration in the shot. The first is that we are making sure that the silhouettes read as clearly as possible. So if I turn, there's a lot of things we can do just rotating this around the Z-axis here for this teacup and the saucer. And the handle is really the only thing you can see moving around besides the little bit of movement we're getting from the plate because of the edges. But if you can choose to place this any way you want. If you place this outside of the frame of the shot, and again, reference this upper right hand corner here. Actually, I'll just make this full screen so you guys can see it. If I rotate this out of the shot, is this going to look like a teacup? That's kind of important. And if I pull the handle in, at what angle does this sell that the design and the uniformity and the fact that it's the object that I'm trying to portray it as the best? Or does rotating it slightly off axis over here do that for us? And the best angle you can find that gives you enough of a read that you feel like, oh, okay, like I like that detail, I like the way it's reading. That's what you're shooting for. And so for me, it's like right in here because I can see the little hook on the handle and it gives me some interesting shapes going on there. Also, bear in mind, this fountain pen is pointing a certain direction for a certain reason. The cracks on this sort of amber fossil or whatever, they're leading you into this fork, which is leading you into the curvature of this map, which is pulling you back into the journal. And when we have this other amulet over here, that's going to be pointed a certain direction, which hopefully leads you back up and around the image. And if we have this little handle for the teacup pointed out to the right, that linear line right there is gonna lead you into that teacup. And if the spoon is hanging off the side over here, see what I'm saying? It draws your eye around, and you've almost got this sort of like figure 8 thing happening around the image. And it's a little bit more hypnotic and makes you wanna stare at the image longer. And that's kind of the goal, is it's a cheap trick to keep you engaged with what you're looking at. So if you're gonna take all the time, 100 hours or whatever it's gonna take you to finish an illustration like this, it really pays to sit back and think about your composition, because with composition, with lighting, with subtlety in every little area, it completely changes the way that it turns out. And one decision can derail the success of an image, and so it's high stakes, but at the same time, you learn as you go, and then you pick things up. And I've had things not turn out as well as could have in the past, and that's you learn from it, So it's not something to be freaked out about, but you should definitely experiment with what works and what doesn't work. So, all right, we've got our teacup kind of placed in, and we need to make sure it's the right scale for us. So, okay. Think about it like this. If this is a teacup, this is an ink pen, we may not know how big the maps are, or this, or the journal, because the journal could be any size. But you know basically how big an ink pen is. You know how big quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies, you know how big those are. These are dollar bills. So is this too big, too small? And that's how I'm judging. You can get out, your measurements here and play with the units and stuff like that. But for something like this, it's not important to be that accurate as long as you can nail the scale visually. And so that's what I'm planning on doing, instead of measuring every little aspect of how this works. So I think this definitely needs to be bigger. So I'm gonna scale up. Pull this like that. Okay, and here's another interesting thing. The way that objects overlaps are interesting. So if you put objects next to each other and they're just barely touching on the corners, or if they intersect right at the corner, anywhere, whether it's going off the page and it's exactly lined up, or it's just grazing it or whatever, it feels wrong. It feels forced, like you're trying too hard. And so the goal here, and this is getting back to the second thing, rather than focusing just on the silhouettes, is when you're laying out an illustration, you want it to feel unplanned. You want it to feel like in the moment. So if someone walked up with a camera and they were to take a snapshot of what's going on in this scene, you don't want it to feel like someone sat here for days and staged it, right? Even when they shoot magazines for stuff like this, they try to make it feel random, And there's a method to the madness, but you got to make things feel a little off so that they're not so perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this real fast because I've had some issues with things crashing lately. Okay, so a good example right here is this teacup is split like right down the middle of this cup, and it's not terrible, but it's gonna be noticeable. And so I'd rather do something like maybe like a 3/4 with it on the page. And you also got to bear in mind how much space this is taking up. If we put it a 3/4 off the page, is it even worth having it in the shot? We're leaving so much room here that we got to put something else in its place because this isn't really working as an empty place in the middle of the image. So I think I'd rather pull it back this way and then kind of adjust this one. So I just did what I said I shouldn't have done, which is move that around without using the constraints because I was in camera view. So I'm gonna lock this down to the ground. Hey Lily, it's good to see you. I see you. Thank you for leaving a comment and checking me out here. How you doing? Okay, so looking up here, referencing that angle, I want to pull this down in the Y axis until it's about 1/3 of the way in. Notice too, like how this is paying off. Like this is a postcard underneath the corner of this journal, and it's leading us right into this, this angle right here is leading us right into the handle of that teacup. So that's what I'm talking about. It moves you around the scene and connects you and feels, you know, interesting. Okay, so now we got to readjust where this is sitting so it's not gonna intersect anything. I don't know, it may not. We want to keep an overlap if we can, but that's close. Something like that, maybe. Okay. Yeah, that just barely works. Any further over here and that lip would just be grazing at the same angle, and that wouldn't be good. And it's so hard to remember that. Like you get in the moment and you start staging stuff, and you know, you might take a break and come back days later and you're just like, what was I thinking? I mean, stuff is just obviously popping out as, you know, I lined this up subconsciously so that it was perfect, and like, no, that's a huge no-no. You don't do that in art. So, okay. I'm sorry if I'm going a little slow tonight, guys. I'm really trying to speed up and you know, focus as I go, but it's kind of difficult sometimes. All right, let's do a spoon. All right, so reading Lily's comment here. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've started streaming a little bit more, so getting into design, that's really cool. This is a little bit of everything, so it's 3D and 2D and painting and everything combined, but I appreciate you dropping by. It's I need to come back to class and see you guys soon. Okay, so the method here is going to be subsurf for the basic shell, and we're going to probably just go into a regular shape here and cap this off, and then we're going to build on top of that. At least I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to build on top of that with some extra meshes for the sculpture. And so let's see what time we have. 40 minutes in. Okay. I'm going to go till 9. So yeah, maybe we'll get the spoon all the way done. Let's play. Here's a fork. Kind of shows you the same idea. A little bit less extravagant because these are kind of carved into the fork itself and they're not coming off as much. But yeah, so let's do this. Now you're gonna see the spoon in through the T when we get to the final shading and rendering and all that sort of stuff. So you gotta, this is one of those areas where you can't fake it. You're gonna have to, you know, just, you're gonna have to do it for real. All right, let's see. Trying to think about how much of this I want to use a mirror modifier for. Let's just start with a plane and see what happens. So go ahead and we have to decide whether we want it to be like a completely symmetrical spoon or if we want it to be sort of like a tablespoon that we would have in our everyday lives. So I think I do want it to be a little bit unsymmetrical. And then I'm gonna inset those and create the sort of scoop for the spoon. Inset again, pull that down. And I'm gonna speed up a little bit and not cover like all the keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that for anybody watching, because we need to kind of get going. Okay, so I'm actually gonna turn this back into something of a regular circle here. So we'll jump into loop tools and let's do a circle from this angle. I just want it to be close. It doesn't have to be perfect. Notice I'm also not going to thicken this up unless we get to until we get to the solidify part of it, I'm not gonna actually model a wall because it needs to just be uniform. So I want this a little deeper probably. Something like that. And pull the walls down a little bit more. Okay. Off of this, let's go ahead and do the mirror modifier. So this central line, we need to have it lined up exactly on the x-axis. So if I scale on the y-axis by 0, that's going to flatten all that back out. So then we can delete half of the spoon, add a mirror modifier, make sure that's going on the y-axis, and pull it up above the subsurf here. Return on clipping and merge, and now we've got ourselves only half a spoon to work on. Okay, so I'm gonna grab face mode, inset, but I'm gonna hit B for border, and that's going to only inset to one side. So that means we can leave the middle connected and then pull this over. So something like that. And this is gonna be the start of our handle. So something like that. You gotta remember it's gonna be twice as thick as this side. So we wanna pull this in quite a bit. Okay, let's pull the reference back up. Okay, so it's hard to see through all of this, but you're basically gonna have everything tapering in nice and even on the sides, and then it's going to hook up and over, and all the stuff that's on top, just ignore it, because we're gonna come back and add all that stuff later and decide, you know, whether or not it really needs to be connected. This stuff right here on top will be actually sculpted into the surface of the handle. And some of this would be created and then sort of welded on. And, you know, you have to decide for yourself, like, what pieces you actually want to be connected and what you don't want to be connected. And are you going to notice? Because if you're not going to notice, the great thing about this is that you can actually model a lot of these the way we did the handle for the teacup. And you can model that separately, not have to worry about the geometry, and just tack it on the side. And as long as there's not any obvious connection issues with shadowing in the shot, which if you're far away from it, usually you're not going to notice something that subtle. So also, if you do, is it faster just to paint it out in Photoshop later? Because I might as well do that. I think people really underestimate the power of combining 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional processes for stuff like this. Because if you can learn how to draw and paint on top of being a really good 3D artist, I'll tell you what, you are somebody not to be messed with. Because there are so few people that can do all of it. And yeah, so if you can pick up a new skill, definitely do it. It will, it'll make you somebody people really want to work with. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to kind of extrude the overall bend for the spoon. And I'm not trying to be accurate at all here. I'm just trying to get this curvature in place and then kind of nail the length where it needs to be. I don't know anything about these types of spoons, or even, you know, how to differentiate or classify one spoon versus the other. I just know that, you know, what everybody knows about spoons that uses them on a regular basis. So up to you to decide how much you want to educate yourself on the research. But in this case, it's such a small piece that I think we're going to be able to get away with quite a bit. So I'm not going to be super worried about how this terminates on the end of this, because we are going to cover it up a bit. Let's see what we need to do here. All right, so what I'm gonna do before we have all of this connected up, I'm gonna select all of those faces that are connecting there, delete those, select the handle, make it a separate object. Let's make sure all of the normals are facing out the right way. And now I'm gonna go ahead and solidify before we connect everything back up. So throw a solidify on there, and then we have to decide how thick that spoon is gonna get. Looks pretty thin in the reference, so probably do something like that before the subsurf happens, and that way we're getting those rounded edges. Always experiment with the order of your modifier stack. There's always some interesting things you can do. Okay. So before I apply all this stuff, in case I want to change the thickness later without having to, you know, do it manually, duplicate this. I'm going to move it to the last layer, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply all of that without the subsurf being applied. So now we need to open up a section here, so this can be joined back up. So let's delete those faces. And now what we're gonna do is we have to apply the mirror, but since this has the same modifier on both, you can select this one, then select this one, Control J, and join those as one object again. And now we can continue our modeling. So all we really need to do is bridge these edge loops, and there should be the same number of faces or edges or vertices between both of these loops. And then I think I can use bridge edge loops. Okay, in this case it didn't work, probably because the vertex vertices are recorded out of order. Maybe it's because I need to go ahead and create one more section where that joins up. So let's try that. So join that. And then, yeah, that's what it is. So this would need to come over here. Then we could connect that up there, that up there. Go out to this side. That side, and then connect up. This may look a little confusing if you're not used to how subsurf modifiers work, but this is the fun stuff. All right, I'm gonna extrude a vertex and an edge up from there. Pull that over in the x-axis. We're in the same process. We're gonna add faces. So we connect everything back up. Okay, definitely want to sharpen up everything so that it's not sort of just mushing together right here. I like the way this is folding from the top view, sort of into the side. But what we don't want to have is sort of this just you know, shape happening there. So I'm going to select all of the edges going all the way around. We're going to bevel. And I don't want to add tons of detail because this part of the spoon is going to be under the T. But anything that you might notice, I want to fix. Let's pull these down just a little bit. Alright. Yeah, that needs to come in. Okay, and one of the things we can do is add a new edge loop and slide that down towards where it connects, and that will crease up sort of how that's working for us. So now that we're connected back up, I want to make this easy on myself. So once again, I'm going to get rid of half of this. I want to select the vertices that aren't crossing over on the x-axis. delete those. Okay, mirror modifier. On y-axis, pull it up in front of the subsurf so that there's no weird non-merging happening there. Like that. Turn the clipping back on. Save. Always save. Tell you what, I was not thrilled last night when I lost that work. But it happens, so you just gotta move on. Okay, want to make sure I'm maintaining quads, so I'm not getting any weird pinching. I am. It's a weird quad, but it's there. Pull this in. So this is hooking in a little too sharp for my taste, so I'm gonna pull that out a little bit, and you just want to flatten that back out. So there we go. I might pull that up so it's kind of, you know, flowing a little bit more. There's a lot you could do to the side of the spoon. You could add another loop this way to give it a little bit more of an interesting taper or whatever. In this case, I think that's too much detail for our purposes. We don't really need to do that. Question we want to answer at this point is, do we want to bevel the edges of our spoon? I definitely want to widen this up, I think. So maybe edge slide to start off with. We can pull this over. If it's too small, it's gonna look kind of frail and like it would break off. I don't want to do that. Also, we want to make sure we're getting an interesting curvature there. Too much and it's kind of wonky looking, and too little and it looks like it should be a knife. So play with that a little bit. So all right, pull these back a little bit. I want to keep this a little skinnier all the way down, so I'm gonna pull those in. I also think I want to sort of skinny this up. I'm going to turn on proportional editing and pull this whole object in from the side. Still not liking the way this is doing this little sharp hook right here. And some of that probably has to do with how close that vertex is. So I'm going to pull that down. Maybe I need to pull. If I pull it too far away, this consistent edge is not going to be there, so don't want to do that. Maybe that'll work. Helps a little bit. Oh, let's turn off proportional editor. Okay. Again, from this far away, are we gonna care? Probably not. All right, so we've got our basic spoon. I'm gonna smooth out some of the lumpiness down here. All right, I'm just gonna focus on the outer silhouette right now. All right, let's switch into a different side view here. make sure we're liking. That's sort of coming around for us. Okay, and I want to make sure that from this angle that this wall is still smoothly curving from side to side. And if it's too complicated to see what's going on over here, reference the other mirrored side to see kind of what's happening. Is this the way a spoon would actually curve, or is it too sharp of fall off? You know, look for those things as you go. That's a little better. Okay, let's call this good for now. And let's play. Okay. Do we need to duplicate this? Yeah, why not? Pull this into the first layer. And then relative to the teacup in this file, I definitely want to scale it so that it's proper size. This is going to be a, what would this be? Silver. So let's just call it that and give it a tiny bit of a green tint there. Okay, I have no idea how big a teaspoon. Wait, yes I do, a teaspoon, obviously. Oh, I feel so stupid sometimes. Okay, teaspoon. All right, so but would a teaspoon for something this old be the same size? I don't know. I don't know if it's the exact same kind of teaspoon that we would have normally these days. I don't want to make it huge. If I make it huge, it's going to feel really awkward in the cup. So yeah, I want to be aware of that. All right, so I'm going to pull this in, and then we need to angle this up so that it feels like it's, you know, sitting on the edge of that cup there. So let's hide the tea itself, and then want to be able to see kind of how this is lining up. So what we can do is switch into quad view and then wireframe, and from the side here, I should be able to tell how things are lining up. So I wish there was a way to do wireframe view in only one view and not all of them simultaneously. That's kind of annoying. So we can place the 3D cursor somewhere. Maybe they'll fix that in 2.8. I'm putting all my hopes and dreams in whatever they do for 2.8. I'm convinced that it's gonna make everything in life just taste better and feel better, and you know, I'm never gonna be disappointed on Christmas anymore, and you know, I don't know. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. A lot of it sounds too good to be true. And I know it's not, because they've been showing the feature updates, and every day I've been really, really excited for what's happening. But yeah, 2.8 is going to be cool. All right. So maybe a little, well, before we go off axis, I'm not convinced that that spoon needs to be that tall. So while we have this in a very lined up view, I'm going to toggle this back to one view. I'm going to sort of manually shorten the distance here to where it feels just a little bit more natural. So it's still pivoting from that 3D cursor down there. Is that too much? Maybe that's too much. It's a subtle thing, a spoon and the way that it bends. I think it's so funny being, maybe it's any kind of artist, but I feel like especially a 3D artist, you spend most of your life, you know, researching so that you can make stuff look the way it's supposed to look. And that's a side of the job that no one really ever hears about or can appreciate, but you learn so many weird things because you have to make stuff look the way realistic, the way it's supposed to look. And so it's funny, every project, like I'll just pick up this useless information that I just know I'm never going to find a use for again. But it's, you know, that's the job. So that's what we do. All right, so I'm paying attention to the edge of the cup here. I'm gonna try to get it as close as I possibly can without feeling like it's intersecting. So I'm constraining on the x-axis and I'm holding shift to really dial this in as I move my mouse. There we go. So one of the other things I talked about, I think last time or the time before, is if you switch on ambient occlusion, it's going to turn on shadowing for the 3D viewport. And when we get Eevee, this is going to just be like cake, like easy. But basically you can crank up AO and it'll show you with self-shadowing where things are connecting to ground planes. And anytime you get a crevice of one object close to a crevice of another object and they create that tiny gap, you're going to get shadowing. And that's really, really cool because it helps you ground stuff when you're trying to put stuff where it needs to be. So you can play with these settings a little bit. If it's looking too grainy, you can bump the samples up. If you get anywhere near like 100, at least in my case, that's it's going to slow your viewport down. So just be careful you don't crash things. All right, I think that's a good starting point. I still feel like that taper is, or that curvature is too much. So back to the 3D cursor. Yeah, something like that. That's good enough. See, the spoon is still not shaped the way that I want it to be shaped down here, but screw it, I don't care. You're never gonna see that, so whatever. If I was gonna sell this, or you know, maybe if I was gonna do it for a client and they were wanting to see multiple angles of the object and all that, I mean, maybe it would be important, but in this case, it's just not. All right. Yeah, researching is cool. It's one of those things where like every time I do a new 3D project, I'll probably get on Pinterest and pin at least 100 pieces of reference just so that I've got a clear idea of what I'm doing. And then this time it was like 200 pins just to make sure for each of the models that I was working on that I knew what I was doing. And I still don't think it's enough for all the pieces. So, but yeah, researching's fun. You got to kind of enjoy learning, or it isn't fun. So I'm kind of that way when it comes to drawing. Man, I would love to be able to do comics or draw. Like I grew up drawing and then I transitioned to 3D, and I would love to be able to do like anatomy and people and drawing that sort of stuff. And I can sculpt that sort of stuff in 3D, but I cannot for the life of me like discipline myself to sit down and learn how to draw all the silhouettes and all the angles, and it's a different kind of art, you know, and I appreciate it. I love watching people do it. But man, I don't have the patience, and I do this stuff. I mean, it's tedious. It requires patience, but it's different. I don't think it interests me enough to keep me entertained. And so I'll get sleepy. I'll sit there, try to start drawing, and then it's too hard. You have to think about perspective and, you know, anatomy and foreshortening and everything. And it's just like, oh. Or I could hop in a Blender and just make something and it's already in the right perspective and then I can move on. And I think that's kind of what got me hooked on what I'm doing is the ability to have some of it be on autopilot. You know, I'm sure I spend my time, you know, making up my time in other areas where it would just be insanely tedious to somebody who draws all day long. But, you know, for me, it's fun. Okay, so the question at this point is, do we want to work on finalizing the spoon with the sculpting, or do we want to get into like maybe putting a doily or something underneath the saucer for the teacup? I think I'm gonna do both, but I'm not sure which one to work on right now. Anybody out there have any opinions? What do you guys want to see? I've got like an hour left, so we could get into a little bit of sculpting and play around with that. Let's jump back over to the scene file. See how that's looking. Okay, so one of the things I forgot to do is add the spoon to the group. So we need to jump over to the object properties and add this to a group, pick the T set. And now when we save this and we jump back over into the scene, the spoon should come with it. There we go. Interesting. I hid the T and it's staying hidden. That's interesting. I didn't think that would happen. So let's jump to groups. I don't know if I can change that here. Yeah, see, it's hidden right there. I can't edit it here. So what we would have to do is jump back over into this file, unhide the T, and then resave it. It's kind of interesting. I really hope that that sort of stuff isn't still happening in 2.8, but we'll see. All right, man, I can't wait to get into materials on this illustration. It's going to be a fun ride. I'm still wanting shadows and shading stuff. But I stopped trying to make characters. Keep myself interested. Yeah, I respect, you know, the Japanese styles a lot, and it's just as interesting as sort of the DC and the Marvel kind of stuff for drawing. I'm not a huge anime person, but I respect the style. So the important part is like really learning to nail the proportions of, you know, the bigger blocks of all the parts of the body and the torso and all that. You know, I don't think it's super necessary to get in there and learn like all the bones right away and all the names of all the anatomy and the muscles and stuff. But eventually, you know, I think if that's what you're doing, like that's the goal. But that's, you know, that's not really what I focus on most of the time. I do a lot more like hard surface objects, like man-made stuff, and you know, but I'd love to get into some more organic stuff, like nature, animals, people. Okay, what do I want to do? I'm tempted to jump back into this little monster here and play around with what's been going on, but every time I jump in and I start trying to play with the displacement modifiers or render with some material samples, like it crashes. And if I lose work tonight because of a crash during the stream, I don't know if I'm going to survive. So maybe it's just best to leave well enough alone. All right, let's play with the spoon. Let's just see what we can get. Here we go. It's very hard for me to think and talk at the same time. So I'm glad you guys are cool with me just doing my thing. All right, so this one, again, I'm gonna throw on the back layer just in case we ever need to come back and have a spoon for another project. This one we know is, we've got a version of it that's locked in position, and we like the way it's laying and all of that. So what I can do is duplicate this one, and I'm going to move it to the second layer. This one will maintain like our position, rotation, and all that sort of stuff, and we'll use it as a placeholder. So this spoon, jump into our modifier stack, and we can start playing with how we want to do this. So let me get my tablet set up. Oh, I haven't sculpted in months, so this will be fun. Okay. How do we want to do this? We could do dynamic topo, or we could do multi-resolution. I'm gonna do dynamic topo, I think. Do we need 3 of those to get started? Yeah, it's not really gonna matter. All right, so this is gonna be our spoon sculpt. This one will be our spoon base. Now this one, because it'll be easier to just sculpt it if it's laying sort of flat and in the right axis and all that. Luckily we didn't apply like our rotation and all that sort of stuff. So I am going to apply the scale, but I'm going to zero back out the rotation. And if I hit Alt-G, I'm going to zero back out the location. So now it's flat on the ground again. So let's set up the sculpting environment. All right, so I'm going to turn off all of the lines that you're seeing here. So all the X and Y coordinates and the grid floor is going to go away. Something cool about 2.8, if you guys don't know yet, is that you're going to be able to turn on and off the 3D cursor. So if you've ever been in one of those situations where you feel like you got to zoom out, stick it way over here so you can't see it, and then get it out of your way, you won't have to do that anymore, apparently. So that'll be cool. All right, switching to sculpt mode. Let's throw on a matte cap. I always like this one for some reason. It makes me feel like I'm in ZBrush. Any of these will work, but I don't know. This one's fun. So, all right, this is a fresh install, so you guys are going to be able to see all of the settings as we get in here. Dyno Topo is going to make it to where if we have this turned off, and I'll just, as we might as well, we've got some time, I'll go into a little bit of an explanation as I go of what we're doing. You can see the polygons here. If I zoom in, all the little squares. With Dyno Topo off, if I sculpt, it's going to only give me the resolution of what's existing. So if I undo that and turn this on, it's going to add geometry as we go. And it depends on the settings that you have here. So you can pick your detail size. These are settings relative to how the topology is added to the mesh. So you can do it by these 3 methods. And then the draw detail type method would change the way that the geometry is added based on like how far you're zooming in, whether or not it's by your brush settings, and whether or not you want to make this constant so that no matter what you're doing in the 3D viewport, it doesn't change. So I know that was a quick thing. Also, you'll notice symmetry is turned on right now, which I may actually want to keep, but I think I want to do Y to Y. Nope, I want to get it mirroring across the, maybe it's a Z? No, it's one of these. I always hate this thing where you got to pick, maybe it is X. Okay, maybe we won't be able to get that working. May not matter if we try to symmetrize all of that. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. my X symmetry was turned on. This has nothing to do with what I was just doing. It's only deciding whether or not we're going to symmetrize according to this, and if we hit this button. So if I were to paint this here and then I went X to X, it would basically do symmetry across that way for us. So if we pick, let's say Y to Y, yeah, it's going to duplicate that over right there. All right. So in this case, yeah, I want Y on. Let's see. Is it because of the detail size? So if we pick like 3, yeah, there we go. So that's what Dino Topo does. The smaller you make the detail size, the more polygons it adds. You can see you can really get it to start cranking. And I've got a pretty decent machine, but if we were to switch into wireframe view, you can see what it does. So it starts with all of those polygons from our existing mesh, and then based on our settings, as we sculpt, it adds and removes detail to accommodate our decisions. All right. So let's look at reference. I'm going to play a little bit with embedding some of the details right on top of the geometry, and we'll just see if we can get some interesting things happening. So I'm going to start with, we have snake hook. Yeah, we got snake hook. Okay. Let's start with this a little bit, and this is going to take me a little bit of time to get back into. So I'm going to try to position everything here so I've got what I need. All right, so first, and I don't know all the keyboard shortcuts for sculpting yet, so I'm just gonna use the menus. I do know F will increase and decrease the size of that. So the tablet, also going to, let's put this back to something like 4. Let's do brush detail. So that way we can control the degree of fine tuning here based on the detail. And typically speaking, when you're sculpting, you want to start off broad and then you want to get specific after that. And so rather than jumping right in and going super fine detailed, if you do that, you're going to run into some issues. So you want to start off, don't add geometry you don't need. Holding shift, if you left click and drag, will smooth things out. So I like to think of sculpting in this way as sort of a give and take. You're getting in here and you're playing with adding and removing clay. And what I really like about it is it doesn't feel like you can screw up. At least not as much as when you're doing polygonal modeling. If you're doing modeling with polygons, you can screw a mesh up pretty bad. And at that point, you know, you're going to have to make some decisions. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can get in there and get to a point where you're going to have to basically start over. So, yeah, something to just be wary of. All right. So looking again at the spoon, some of this might have just been extra pieces added on and then blended into the rest of the mesh. So we're going to do a little bit of that. But also you can just take some of the existing clay in this case that's sitting there and then pull it off of the spoon itself to get started. So if we grab something like snake hook, play with the size here, and I think, what is it? Control. Yeah, so F changes the size of your brush, Shift F changes the strength, which is right here. So we'll go a little bit more subtle. And I'll just show you how this works. So you can pull, snake hook will pull sections off like that. Now for this, you definitely want to have, or at least in my opinion, you want to have Dino Topo turned on. and it's pretty cool. You can do all sorts of interesting little stuff like that. And then once you get the basic, you know, mesh and the structure in there, then you can turn Dino Topo back off and just play with smoothing everything back out. So in this case, we might want to inflate this up a little bit. Definitely don't want like super sharp hooks right there. So I want to get in here, increase that all the way to 1, and then start smoothing that out. So it takes a little bit of time sometimes to get in here and do that. And if it's not giving you sort of what you want, sometimes the best way to get that fixed is you can pinch it off or inflate it again, and that will give you a little bit more surface area to work with. Because if it gets down to where it's like infinitely small here, sometimes it's really hard to work back into the rest of the mesh. So play with this. Like I said, I haven't sculpted in a while, so where are we at? Looking at all the options here for, yeah, let's try flatten. Yep, that'll work. That's what we needed. So flatten and smooth is kind of what I'm messing with there to get that to work. What you can also do is switch back on Dino Topo, crank up the detail size so it's not as small anymore. Something like, let's say 20, and then just touch it once and it'll kind of blow away whatever's there, get it back to a regular size. And then once again, you can kind of turn that back off. So yeah, we can play with like getting some of that basic shape blocked in there like that. And then we're gonna have to look at some reference for how we want the ornamentation and stuff to be shaped. But I'm probably just gonna do a section of this because we're already like half an hour out from being done. And I'll just play a little bit with the way this looks so you guys can see how this would work. So flatten this out a little bit, hold in shift now to smooth this back out on the edges. I want that to be like this. Smooth transition there. Now we've got a flat sort of transition up to here, and then it sort of fades back into the rest of the spoon body. And it's kind of cool. Like you've got the symmetry still turned on, so whatever you do on this side is going to be done on that side as well. And so now we can just kind of go to town and play with flattening that up. Now the other thing that's going to happen as you start flattening up in the middle here is it's automatically going to give you a crease down that side without you even having to crease anything up. So that's a little benefit of using the flatten tool. And then if you really want to get in here and play with creasing, then you've got a couple of options. You can crease, which will pinch and sort of go in, or you can pinch and it will add that going out. So the best way to do this is to just show you. And again, I want to play with the size, and then I don't want it to be super strong. So I think my tablet pressure is also turned on right here. So that should be influencing a little bit too. Okay, so I actually switched into rotate instead of pinch. So that's what pinch does. It takes all the existing geometry around it, pulls it in, just like you were pinching something between your fingers. Crease will take what's there and kind of drop it in. So if I were to drop the size of this down to something small, it's going to try to take what's there and then pinch it in. Now, in this case, we don't have Dino Topo turned on, so we're getting a pretty ugly result. But if you turn this on and drop this back down to like 5%, you're going to get a much more sharp result there. So let's try this again with pinch. And trick as you get into doing sculpting is you want to make this as even as possible, and that's not easy to do when you're just starting off. But since we want more detail in this area, Dino Topo is going to be good because it gives us more to work with. So I'm using the pinch, and then when I hold shift and I smooth that out, you can see just how many more polygons are added in because it's getting dense. Now, there is a limit to how much you can push this in your system based on your memory and things like that. But you got to remember, we're going to have to come back after we're done sculpting, and we're going to have to basically reconstruct this mesh anyways to use it in our final scene because it's just going to be so dense. There's no way to try to render that. So we can kind of go to town and not have to worry about, you know, what it's doing. Because yeah, we're gonna go back and fix it later. So you'll see here in the middle, it's joining up with that symmetry. Smooth this out a little bit. So here it's kind of interesting. We fade that in. I'm gonna choose flatten one more time. Okay. And so as you get in here and you're looking to add details, the other thing you might ask yourself is, with the object that I'm creating, does it need to be sculpted in such a way that it's edge perfect? You know, do I need to have it to where I fix all the smoothness and everything's just, you know, exactly the way it would be if it were, you know, drawn with vectors, you know, and stuff like that? Or is it going to have a little bit of human touch added in that's going to be imperfect? Is it going to have been forged, you know, 100 years ago, and then there's going to be tarnish and like all this stuff in there that messes up the details? And if so, you don't really need to worry about fixing all of those little things. Now, the one thing I will say is consistency is always going to be king when it comes to sculpting, because it's going to be obvious that you're not in control of your mesh if you if you've got just raggedy edges and all that stuff happening everywhere, and it's not on purpose, you know, obviously. So just be aware of that. So I might turn this back up to something like 10. Now, clay strips is something that I use quite a lot when I'm sculpting because it's easy to add some bulk and some you know, mass back on top of something, and it's a great way to block stuff in. So I'll undo that. One thing we haven't talked about yet is if you hold Control instead of just left clicking, if you hold Control, it's going to do the inverse of whatever operation you currently have going. So that's a way to remove clay in this point, or in this case. So maybe I'll invert that a little bit, smooth it. Invert that again, smooth it. And if you have too many polygons going on and you're trying to do some stuff like this, you're going to start noticing little tears and holes in your mesh. So pay attention to that small stuff, because fixing that can kind of suck. So, all right, let's block in with clay strips some of those details before it's getting too late on us. I'm going to drop down the size to something like this. And we can do this manually and just start drawing. Or we can use some other techniques to help us out here. So let's see. For stroke here, we've got different methods. Space is the typical one you're going to find, but if you want to do patterns, you can have things like this where you pick an image and basically have all the detail added in for you. So if we had more time, I would show you how to do that, maybe in the next stream. Lines and curves are an interesting way to draw because you can, draw a straight line and it'll fill that in for you. Curves might be what we need to use here to get a really accurate way to get these details blocked in. So maybe we'll try that. Draw a curve. Pick a new one. I wonder if it's based on grease pencil. Okay, don't know. Okay, I've never used this one before, so I'm not really sure how this one works. But we can just draw, that'll be fine. So let's jump in. Now, you see how straggly that is? That means our spacing is not close enough together. So this needs to be dropped down to something smaller. There we go. So if you've got a steady hand, you can get in here and make things look pretty, but you really got to kind of know what you're doing. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to zoom out and then make sure that I'm at relative detail. That's going to basically change the number of polygons it's adding or removing based on how far I'm zoomed in or out. And then let's leave that up at like 5. And then, yeah, subdivide collapse will be good. So I'm going to start with just adding a little bit of a flourish like this, smoothing that out. So the goal is to build this up like in just small layering, So there's also quite a bit of lag on my tablet between when I start drawing, and sometimes it doesn't even kick in. So it's like you got to start over on the other side and then work your way in. Okay. And then before we play too much with the smoothing, I want to draw some more details in there. So let's play with the strength here on smoothing. There's a setting you can turn on which will remember your brush settings from brush to brush. And I don't know if it's under options. Unified settings, yeah. So basically what this does, if you check off any of the unified settings stuff, is for every brush that you switch between, it's going to remember all of these details. So if you want to create a separate strength for each one, you can uncheck that. And then let's say every time I smooth, I want it to be a really, let's say shallow kind of smooth. And then whenever I draw or I do clay strips, I want it to be like a 0.5. So now when I switch between these, it's going to remember that strength setting. Do I have, yeah. Want to make sure if you got a tablet that you're using, Keep your pressure sensitivity settings checked off here, because you're losing a lot of sensitivity and the advantage you have of having a tablet if you don't have that stuff checked off. So left and right brackets, just like in Photoshop, will change the size of your brush. So that's something to be aware of. In this case, I want to fix this a little bit. I'm also going to clay strips. I don't know what the shortcut is for that. Hold Control, dig into the mesh a little bit here. I want to add some layering. So get out to the edge, we're going to carve into this a little bit. And then once again, smooth. Tell you what, if all I did was sculpt, it'd be like watching Bob Ross. It'd be interesting. All right, pull that in a little bit. Just chipping away. And if all you do is you get in here and get into the habit of, you know, chipping away at something and then smoothing it and then chipping away, it's easy to get in and forget that there's a process, there's a method to the madness. And so I'm bad about this right now because I don't sculpt enough on a regular basis. But if you get in here and get into the habit of doing that, you're going to undo a lot of work as you go. And so the best method is to stay zoomed out, work big, and then slowly get zoomed in more and more as you go. And that way, you're not going to get too detailed too early, because if you get too detailed too early and then you change your mind, you're going to have to zoom back out, get rid of it, and block the big shapes back in anyways. So that's a really common beginner mistake, is to spend hours zoomed all the way in too close, and most of the time you're going to end up at some point undoing a lot of your work. So remember that. Another tool you can use if you don't want to use clay strips is you can use, there's a draw command. So I might show you that in a minute. Yeah, I don't like that, so I'm gonna go the other way. And what's cool about this is if you block in like a wide base, you can come back in with a skinnier brush like this and then really go to town with the details. So looks a little messed up right now, but if we zoom out and like, let's say I switch back to the smooth, I lower the strength down like a lot, and then I just start doing some really subtle left clicking, I can get some of that smooth back out and it won't be a real big issue. So just pull that back a little bit, smooth, we're good. See, blends all those details back in, and then we can go back in and build them back up from what's existing. And that give and take is, again, it's really hard to master, but it's something that if you can, some people, when they get into modeling, like all they do is sculpt, and you know, it's something that I definitely want to explore more as we get into new projects, because sculpting is so much fun. Oh, right. I got the strength separated. Oh, what is the command for draw? Okay, so X is draw, S is smooth. So smooth that out a little bit. Switch back to draw. Okay. I think I want to sort of smooth this out and have it come back in further towards the middle. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's have it sweep in this way. There we go. Feels a bit more correct. This is kind of reminding me of drawing an ear or sculpting an ear. Smooth out the middle here. Again, there we go, building up layers. Smooth layers. There we go. Okay, now I can hop to the other side and correct, and it will work the exact same way. So okay, so it's getting a little lumpy, and what we want to do to start playing with that a little bit is deciding how we want this stuff to contour. And so you can flatten, and we can go back in and go down the fronts of this and flatten that sort of back up, or we can only flatten sort of the inside. That might help a little bit. One thing I'm going to do is inflate some of these areas because they're getting a little hard to see. So I'm going to inflate where that is meeting up in the middle there. That's going to give us a little bit more to work with. Inflate here. See what that's doing? It's just blowing it up like it's a balloon, and it's giving us a little bit more to play with. A little bit more body. So if you're losing some of that, extra girth or whatever, then play with the inflate a little bit. Okay. Something like that. And yeah, it's getting real lumpy. So some of this you can change by jumping in with a grab. Where's the grab? Come on, Brandon. There it is. Okay. So let's pull that up. Grab big sections like this. And if it's really chugging, it's probably because your dyno topo is still turned on. So turn that off and then kind of play with that a little bit. And in this case, let's jump into flatten and play with some of the insides of these meshes. So something like this. Okay, too much. Let's pull that straight down. Sure, why not? Let's flatten from this side. And then if we wanted to, we could flatten the tops. I don't really know if I want to. We could play a little bit with it. I don't want to go overboard. It'll even out the lumpiness a little bit, I guess. That's good. It'll actually help around that too, just like that. See how that's working. Got a little interesting shape going on there. And so this is really all it is. It's just kind of moving around and deciding, what you want to be sort of popping out and what you want to be moving in. And so there we go. There we go. So I'm holding control to get this to drop in further, and then shift to go back over and smooth it back out. So let's jump back to flatten. And to really get this sort of locked in place, layering helps, masking helps, and then again, pinching really tightens up those edges. So if that's what you're looking for, pinch will be your friend, but you gotta be careful with the pinch because it can get a little aggressive sometimes. Right now, I don't have Dino Topo turned on, so it is using only what is there to pinch into place. If I don't like the way that is messing with all of my geometry, I can turn back on Dino Topo. And now when I pinch, it's gonna add a little bit different behavior there for us. So in this case, we want to crease in instead of pinching. And there we go. So crease there, draw back on top, pull those edges back out where we just creased. Here we go. Okay, so now I want to pinch this up. So let's try crease and see if that does what we want it to do. No, I want to use pinch. Okay, it's not good. Let's undo that. Okay. It's about time to wind down. All right, let's turn that back up a little bit. Let's get in here and play a little more. This one's good because it equalizes kind of the layering all the way across, and then makes it not so lumpy. There we go. Crease this, flatten the sides here. So it's a little hard to use this workflow. I'm using a little Wacom tablet and my mouse and the keyboard all at the same time. Okay. Smooth all this back out one more time. Okay, let's keep this going over here. Okay. So I'm liking the way that when I flatten an area, I'm getting an automatic crease on the other side. So it's kind of doing a 2-in-1 sort of thing for me. I'm enjoying that. Okay, so problem here, smooth before it turns into a bigger problem. I'm not pressing super hard because I don't want it to freak out on me. Okay, so anyways, you can kind of see how that looks. Not the prettiest thing we've done so far, but it, you know, it works. So let's blob this a little bit here. And I'm adding some of that dynamic topology back in. So by starting on a smooth, even, flat surface, we've been able to go in and re-add some curvature without it automatically just turning into something super lumpy for us. Then we can go back in and redefine how that's looking. Flatten out the base of this, reshape that a little bit so that we've got a nice even curvature into that. Grab. Let's undo. Save. All right, dino topo off. Now I'm just grabbing sections and moving stuff around. One of the last things I'll share tonight is that the curvature can be modified. So if you want more of a rounded fall off for your grab, you can pick that and it will help kind of ease the way that's working. And you don't want to get too detailed too fast, but that's the basic idea. So let's do a quick blob here. Flatten. Turn that back on. We don't have nearly as many polys down here, so we should have added some more here. So we'll flatten. I want to get too far up in here and mess with those walls, but okay, let's grab. Keep forgetting to turn the dino topo off. Okay, I don't want to keep that fall off that way. There we go, it's a little better. Smooth some of this out. Sorry, I'm getting quiet. Having to think more. All right, so there you go. That's how we're going to be adding basic sculpted details onto the surface of the spoon. Obviously, a lot more cleanup that needs to happen for us to get this into a better place and work that out. I'll leave you with a little preview of like how this might look. So if we were to turn that on there, I'm going to jump back into object mode real fast. Let's smooth this out. And you can see kind of what a a spoon would look like using some of these matte caps. So this one is more of a metallic silver, and you can kind of see what that's doing. Anyways, I'm going to keep working, clean stuff up, maybe move on in some areas. I'll be back next week with some streams. I'm not sure exactly when, but I will update the Facebook group. I will update, if you're on the mailing list, then I'll update that. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm promoting theorangeguild.com, which is my new business. So there are going to be links in the descriptions. There's already links in the other videos on my YouTube channel. If you want to get your first free month with Blender training just like this, but more concise, more detailed and better, because we've taken the time to edit it down and all of that, then you can head over to theorangeguild.com, and using a coupon code from the YouTube channel in the description, you'll get your first month free. It's $19 a month. And there's a lot of courses already, a lot of hours already. So 4 Blender courses, just added 2.5 new hours from some of these projects into my latest course. And so jump in, and it's a full platform with training that's ongoing. For Blender, you'll have mentorship access, so you can ask me questions anytime you want, and I'll pop in on a regular basis and answer questions and give you feedback on portfolio or whatever. And so anyways, thank you for joining the stream. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like and share no matter what platform you're on, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, whatever. And I really appreciate you guys tuning in and checking out another stream from me. So it's late. I'm going to go grab some dinner and head home. And I will see you guys again next week at some sort. So catch you later.